the roll.
Calling the roll, Ms. Baker.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Shrine. Mr. Shrine is absent at the moment. There is a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any public comments?
Ms. Lou.
Good afternoon. We just finished an important meeting. Now we have another important one. To put these two together, we know how important it is for Inspector General's office to be independent, to be clearly structured, and to carry out clearly the duty described clearly. Sure, there are lots of nicks and kicks we still have to tune up, this and that, but I'm here to fully support. Having this structure is really a helpful thing. On the other hand, the structure for our judicial systems, sheriff's office, is really in question. Maybe GI should look into that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
No one else is signed in.
All right, then I would ask for approval of the minutes from the June 4th, 2019 meeting.
So move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing none, minutes are approved. All right, we will continue with our committee, and I think this is probably up there for one of the most important things that we do, and that is oversight. Our responsibility to make sure that we know what's going on to the best of our ability, and our Inspector General certainly does help us in that matter. So I'd like to bring forward our Inspector General, Mark Griffin. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Mark Griffin, Inspector General.
Yes.
Chairwoman Baker, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to come and talk with you today. What I'd like to do today, as I understand, is to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing for the last 6 months, but also to answer any of your questions about our prior report. And to make sure that we give you all the answers that we can, I've asked to come with me today my Chief of Staff, Felisa Turner-Howard, who's an attorney and can answer questions, and then also Delante Spencer-Thomas, who's also an attorney. So if there's anything that I can't answer, I think it's important that I try to answer or get you the answers as quickly as possible. So
Right.
I've asked them to be here today as well.
Good. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
And so if I may, I'd like to kind of just give you a quick overview. As you know, I issue 2 written reports a year. The next one is due tomorrow, but just sort of as an understanding of what we're doing and what we've been doing. Let's see if I can learn how to do this.
And we also want to note that this is in draft form. We will have another committee meeting that will be speaking to this once everyone's had a chance, all committee members and even all members had a chance to review this. So if the questions don't come so far as this, only because we've not had a chance to look at it, we do have questions set aside from the last semi-annual report and maybe some other things that were in the interim between this report and the one you're giving now.
And Chairwoman Baker, I want to emphasize that I am delighted and happy to come back as often as you want and to answer any questions either in this forum or through a phone call. I'm available. So just as sort of an overview, I have about 20 slides that I want to kind of talk about. And just as a quick overview, in the last 6 months, we closed 20 investigations. It's a little bit less than usual, but not much more. Last reporting period, we started a new program for tax payments. That increased a little bit, $869,000. We've done a new data project to try to do big data, reviewed 249 secondary employment forms, 186 nepotism. We also did background checks for 154 contractors, issued 61 ethics opinions. There are 4 new debarments. We did a free CLE program for county attorneys to save them and the county money. And then we've been doing in-person ethics training for every new county employee. So that's sort of the big picture, but let me kind of drill down a little bit, I think, on what people want to see. If I can page down, no, maybe cursor. Here we go. Okay, so I know that some of the most interesting things that my office does is investigations, and I just want to give you a little bit of background or a little bit more detail on those that we did in the last 6 months that I think might be most pertinent and salient and interesting. And one of those, which has come up, was a missing cash payment from the Treasurer's Office. And this is a missing payment of $2,214 in cash. And that occurred on January 3rd when a taxpayer came to pay in cash. And this was to avoid a foreclosure. And these are taxpayers who, if they have to pay in cash, they're often unbanked. And it's really important to them that we handle it correctly. But unfortunately, in this case, we did not. So that $2,214 in cash was never recorded. And it wasn't until March 6th when the taxpayer came to us and said, well, wait a minute, I paid you guys in cash. What happened to my money? We didn't even know that it was missing. So it was because of the taxpayer that we then took a look at the procedures that we had in the Treasurer's Office. They contacted us and we opened an investigation. So first of all, we went to the video. And we saw that, in fact, the taxpayer had paid. There's a record of the taxpayer putting the cash over the counter. But then there's a problem because our video doesn't always cover every aspect of the tax payment. Instead, it's put into what was then called a lockbox, a one-stop shop lockbox. Well, as you can see from the video, it wasn't really locked. We kept the key in the locked lockbox and it was unlocked. And it was in a place where the cameras didn't cover it. So despite our video, we put the cash in a place that was outside of the television screens and the television cameras. And it wasn't counted for every day. Instead, it could go a week or 2 weeks before it was counted. And in this case, it went 60 days without us ever knowing that it was uncounted. So we had a long period of time where cash was being deposited uncounted. And that has a variety of ripple effects. So, for example, the Ohio Revised Code requires accurate receipts every day of the cash that we receive for payment of taxes. But our process was we wouldn't count the cash that day. At most, we'd count it on Friday. So every single day for the first 4 days, we were underreporting and being inaccurate. And then on Friday, we overreported. And throughout this process, we weren't keeping track of where the cash was. And so as a result, that cash disappeared. So that then led us to undertake a pretty comprehensive review of what our processes were and how we tracked the different numbers. And in our review of the data, we found that 30% of the cash transactions were missing documentation. They were missing one form or another that should have been recorded. And much of this stems from the fact that at the time, our process was that a person who was paying cash in a one-stop payment didn't get a machine-generated receipt at the time of payment. So the cash would come into the county, but it wouldn't be recorded in our MVP system until later. And so that then led to a variety of paper copies, of which 30% we found to be missing. So we then reviewed what the best practices were, and we looked at were we following what was recommended by our internal auditor or by the state auditor. And one of the things that we looked at was the prior report where the Department of Internal Audit had said, hey, we need to fix some things, and whether we were doing those today. And you can see that in matching them against the Auditor of State's best practices, we had too many red X's and not enough green checks. I mean, we should be following much better cash management procedures. So we did that, but we also said to ourselves, well, wait a minute, if this process is bad, are we at risk of having missed even more cash payments? Because we only found out about it because the taxpayer came to us. So we then went back and did a very comprehensive review of other payments, and we discovered another additional missing payment of $307. There's some change there as well, which we didn't even know about until we did that as well. So that was our cash management piece. We issued a report. Just recently, we received a response from the treasurer, Chris Murray, who's been very responsive. Treasurer Murray, I think, is obviously very concerned about this. And so he's implemented some important changes from issuing a electronic receipt to changing the practice of who handles the money. So I think we're confident that the report looks good. We're going to follow up and make sure that the changes that he's indicated have occurred. So that's one investigation, I think, of interest that was important to the county. Securing the cash is significant.
If you have any questions at this point?
Yes, just whether we actually lost any money, or was the money that we didn't have documented, were we able to find the actual money?
We were not able to find the actual money. So we lost $2,214. And it's my understanding that that money has since been repaid personally by the county treasurer in order to make the county whole. So the taxpayer came to us. We couldn't find the money. There was as I understand it, a transfer from the general fund of the treasurer's account, which was then made good personally by the county treasurer. And the disposition of the extra 307, we haven't found either. The other piece that I would mention is that during the course of this investigation, there was another 4,000 that went missing for several days until it was found on an employee's desk, and that was recovered. But that's not the proper way to handle cash. Taxpayers work hard; they give us our money, and for some who come to us on foreclosure issues, their homes are at risk. So we need to do better.
So do you have a question? Go ahead, Councilman.
Just for clarity, when you said the treasurer paid out of his own personal account pocket, or?
That is my understanding, and I've seen documentation to that effect.
Okay.
So it's our belief that this was not a bookkeeping error, that this was malfeasance.
Right. Were you able to find the person responsible?
So we have discussed, we've referred the matter to law enforcement, to the Auditor of State, as well as others in the Sheriff's Department. I think that unfortunately, I don't want to mischaracterize it. So the answer to your question is no. It is, I think, possible that further proceedings will occur, but we went 60 days without even knowing about it in a lockbox that was open to over a dozen people. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to say anything more than that because there might be new information that I'm not aware of.
So that basically puts a cloud over an entire portion of the department. Those who could potentially, their integrity gets brought into question.
Absolutely. And there have been some personnel changes in that department. But I think that one of the communications to us from some of those cashiers is we want you guys to take care of this because we know that we personally did the right thing. So please, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, the vast majority of county employees are outstanding. Right. And our obligation is to protect the good ones from the one or two who are not so good. So I think that they were content with the outcome, although wish that it hadn't happened and wish that it had occurred more quickly.
But the structural changes have been made to...
I would say procedural. In terms of the reporting structure, I think it's still the same, but the procedures are significantly different now.
Okay.
And to follow up with that, it's of course important to find it and find that there was cash missing and then remedy and make sure that we're all made whole. But the procedures that are in place now, are they in writing? And is it something where when the county treasurer leaves and another new county treasurer comes in, that there is a written process for understanding how the cash is being handled? Do we have a good policy in place where there's no question how it is that this should be managed?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that I received a letter from the county treasurer on Friday laying out the changes that he had made. I don't know whether those have been then recorded as a formal policy, but I do think that that's something that we'll follow up on because, as I indicated, one of the things that we want to do is to confirm that the changes that we're told are being made are in fact being made. So, and I think that issue of are they being recorded in a policy are important.
I believe so too, because there's one thing to live in the moment, but we also need to make sure that future employees of the county know exactly what the structure should be when they take that office. So I would definitely follow up to see if there is a formal policy in place. Anything else on this? All right, please continue.
I only have one slide on this because this was a joint investigation regarding the spending of federal grant money for an automated fingerprint information system. And because of the structure, we did this along with the Director of Internal Audit, both Corey Swaysgood and Kim Seeley. And so it's still a draft. And so let me just kind of give you big picture things and tell you that it is subject to change. But overall, we looked at the disposition of $300,000 of federal grant money and realized that there was some confusion that really started really from the beginning. And some of that has to do with the failure to track the serial numbers of the HP Blade servers that we purchased. So 200,000 of the federal grant money was intended to purchase 2 HP Blade servers, but at that time we actually purchased 4 that were identical but didn't track them. So you'll see this is a picture. We physically went down to Columbus, and this was John Cornwell, who is our investigator and IT person, who that position was created because of counsel. I want to thank counsel for that, because without his expertise, I don't think we could have understood the architecture of the system or what was necessary. But essentially, we had 4, of which 2 were supposed to be purchased with the APHIS grant system. Those serial numbers, in fact, were just put into the general county system, and the 2 that were actually not purchased with the grant money were put into Columbus but never installed. So the good news is that although there was confusion as to what was happening, there was no theft, but it does represent significant unused resources. So we had $200,000 of Blade servers that have been in Columbus for 3 years that have not been used. And then in addition to that, we had to purchase SQL or SQL Server licenses that were also unnecessary, which were about $60,000, which have also been unused. And some of this confusion is that we were trying to shift from, or we were considering shifting from a fingerprint system that was a standalone basis using an Oracle platform on software that was provided by a company called Cogent to a shared environment with a Microsoft product, SQL, that was the database, and potentially an NEC server. So these were plans where we thought, hey, we'll go get the federal grant money before it expires on June 30, and we'll work these other things out later. So, I think at some level, I commend the people for trying to get the money before it expired. But because we didn't have the rest of the details hammered out, the system wasn't installed properly. And at the end of the day, we had to return the money because it wasn't used as intended in the grant. So we'll have more on that when the draft is approved and finalized by the audit committee.
Do you, at this point, might be premature, but do you have a recommendation of what you would propose so that this doesn't happen again, or is that what you're waiting from the audit committee?
Well, there are many proposed recommendations, and I don't want to, and these are both on behalf of internal audit and myself.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think about the bullet points that are on the first page, and I think that there are probably about a dozen recommendations in terms of planning and communication.
I see under conclusions and recommendations, there's a list of bullets, so we'll review that. But it's good to know that, again, as with the prior case, this is not living for the day, but we're looking to the future so that there's something in writing so everyone knows what the protocol is when it comes to purchasing grant
Absolutely.
or otherwise. Yeah.
Sure.
Yes, go ahead.
Are we able to make any use of the servers, or if not, are we able to sell them and get something for them?
Yes, and so the servers can now be integrated into our general county shared environment. And what happened in part because of the confusion is there was a belief that we couldn't integrate these because we had them designated as the APHIS servers, when in fact they're not. So it's my understanding that the money was reimbursed to the state of Ohio, Ohio Emergency Management Authority, and that we can now, if they haven't already been, plugged in. And so, so the answer to your question is yes, they can now be plugged in. It's 3 years older technology, but the money is not completely lost.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Continue.
I just want to quickly mention, we're continuing to work with law enforcement on a variety of their investigations. When we're asked, we do whatever we can. We are of course prohibited from interfering with any criminal investigation, but we are asked from time to time to assist. And sometimes we start an investigation and then we find out that they have something overlapping, and so we're required then to pull back. And so that's happened quite a bit during this last period of 6 months. But the last thing that we want our office to have happen is that we interfere with a criminal investigation because of the severity of those issues. Another issue, another piece of cooperation with law enforcement is our cooperation with the project by Prosecutor O'Malley and County Treasurer Murray, which is called the Fishbowl. And this comes out of where they used to be in the old days in the County Commissioner's building, where it was a glass place where they would all get together to look at unpaid taxes. And one of their key pieces is to intervene quickly to avoid foreclosure, because one of the things that happens is that when taxpayers start to get into a hole, if it goes too long, it becomes really hard to get them out of it, and that can lead to foreclosure. And so these are really, it's a great program that's been resurrected by the county prosecutor, Michael O'Malley, and the county treasurer, Chris Murray. And our small role in that is to help them with our debarment pieces. And so we started that in the last half. In the last half, we leveraged about $812,000 of new tax payments to the county. This past 6-month period was $869,000. So a little bit of an increase, trying to make sure that these funds are recovered. And when we get involved, it's almost always relating to a private enterprise or a for-profit corporation that owes money, and that seems to be more effective with the risk of debarment for them. I have a few more slides I just want to kind of go through and quickly talk about, and then talk about anything that we've done now and a follow-up on any of the reports that we've done in the past. But ethics and fraud education is an important part of what we do. And so you see the regular ethics updates that we give. Most recently we did something on proper use of credit cards and the ability on frequent flyer miles. So that's the ethics piece. We're also doing pieces on trending data, because one of the things that's important is that we inform people about what's going on, and we want to expand this in terms of the sorts of big data that we look at and really try to focus even more on ways to save the county money. Contractors with aggregate amounts over $10,000, that's the threshold for background checks and registering with my office. But there's a reason that we do this with both the contractors and with county employees. And that is that the way government agencies find out about fraud is by tips. It's not so much internal audits important, management reviews are important, but it's really important when people come to us and say, hey, here's what I have found. And by far, tips are the initial detection piece, and those are from employees. So one of the key pieces that we care about is talking to employees, which is why we're doing the onboarding for every single new county employee, so that they know what the rules are, so they can identify when something's been violated. But then the third part is to encourage them to report it to us or to someone else or to their manager. And again, this is really because county employees want to do the right thing. And tips are the way, when they see something that's wrong, they want people to do something about it. So the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners took a look at what was effective in preventing fraud. And frankly, I was a little surprised by some of these things. So they sequenced it to see what was most effective. And interestingly, the single most effective control for fraud is having a code of conduct. So you see a 56% reduction in fraud. And so one of the reasons that we teach people and we care about our education program is it's not enough to have a code that's buried someplace in dusty books or hidden on an internet, but we have to tell people what that is. So that's really important. And then there are a variety of audit pieces, and we do a little bit of that, but of course, internal audit is the main place there. But then further down, fraud training for employees has a 41% reduction in the severity of the cases. So that's something that we try to do. And then perhaps what's most interesting to me is the last one, the least valuable one, is rewards for whistleblowers. And in my private practice as an attorney, I represented a number of whistleblowers, and so I would have thought this would be great. You give a monetary incentive and people will increase their whistleblowing, but in fact, it's not about the money. It's about doing the right thing. And it's about employees who want to see us work effectively for people. So Just a little bit else this is from the ACFE, again, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Asset misappropriation is the most common type of fraud. And then corruption, I'm not quite sure how their numbers add up, but I think they're a mix of cases. That's why 88% and 47%, I look at that graph and I think, well, how'd they add that? But I think some involve both. So that's a big overview of, started with a general overview of what we've done for the last 6 months, but then tried to drill down on some of the specific things that we've done to give you a flavor of not just the big picture, but also some of the details. So I want to thank you again for the chance to come talk about this report, but also what we did in the last report and answer any of your questions.
Good, thank you. That's good to know, and I'm glad you got to a few of the updates that we needed to hear from what was unanswered from last time. And Councilman Miller, I gave you a copy of the semi-annual report ending December 31st, 2018. So if there's anything in there that you may have questions about, I have a few of them I'd like to run through. And I'm going to begin on page 4 that lists your goals. And I guess just kind of an update of your goals that were stated at the end of last year for this year, halfway through 2019. Of course, you've mentioned the cooperation with law enforcement and authority regarding the related investigations. So we know that that is ongoing. You did mention, though, to have a goal of acquiring full and unrestricted access to county documents, and you particularly mentioned the Department of Information of Technology and the Law Department to obtain the full and unrestricted access. How are you doing on that?
Good. So in the first 2 months of this year, we had some challenges. The charter amendment guaranteed us the full and unrestricted access under the quotes, but there were certain members of the Department of Information Technology that disagreed with that. And we had a series of meetings, and then ultimately it was elevated to the level of the county executive, who intervened and said, no, they have to have it. And so, and I would also thank Matt Carroll as well for his intervention, because there was some significant pushback.
Right.
And I would say, again, I would thank counsel for both clarifying the rights of the IG to information, but also providing us with an expert, being the IT person we hired, because in discussing these technical issues, it was important to have him there to explain, why do we need this database? What does the database do? So, there are continuing occasional issues that come up of, hey, we didn't know that this software program even existed. Can you give it to us? No, we don't really want to. Well, yes, you have to. Okay, you can have it. So there are continuing conversations, but overall, the executive branch has been very good, and I'm not aware of any outstanding issues at this time with respect to number 2 on that. So I feel as though that's been achieved, and I thank the executive folks for that.
That's good to know, and good for our committee to check that off. That's appreciated. The third goal, did you have a question on that, Councilman Miller?
Yeah, my question is, when do you expect the semi-annual report through June 30th of 2019 to be completed?
So it's required to be filed by tomorrow, so at the end of July. My hope is that it will be done by 5 o'clock tomorrow. I will tell you that sometimes we are there till 8 or 9 o'clock, and then we slip it under council's door. It will be done by midnight tomorrow night, and for the benefit of my staff, I certainly hope that it's done before that. And you will get a copy via email, and Chairwoman Baker, we always slip a hard copy under the door for you, and Councilman Miller, we can do that as well.
We will probably have our semi-annual update, given council members a chance to read it. We'll be on break in August, probably in September.
Okay.
So that'll give us a chance to perhaps get some unanswered questions put in front of you by then. And then the initiating the big data, that was new for your department. Review of the county data and data updates, how I know that's ongoing because we're only halfway into the year, but how is that going?
So we've started it, and we need to get better at it. So I think you've seen some of our trending data pieces, and that's a external communications piece to it. But ultimately what we want to do is use a big data concept to find ways to save money and to be more efficient. And We have done some initial studies, looking at tax receipts and other things. So the answer is yes, it's been initiated. But we have big hopes for this, and we hope to do more. So I would say we're not doing nearly as much of it today as we hope to do in the next 6 months and in the years to come.
Okay, we will come back and ask. The last on your goal is the travel requests. You wanted to expedite the conflict of interest. I know with Councilman Miller and myself both serving at Board of Control, travel comes up quite a bit. It's really hard to know at the point of us approving whether it has been through your office for approval, but again, this is a goal. We're only halfway through the year, so there's no expectations that you would be completed, but how is that coming?
Not well enough. So first of all, we do conflicts of interest with respect to travel that's paid for by third parties. So if it's a county paid for event, there's not a conflict of interest because, of course, it's the county that's paying for it. But, we want to give good customer service. And I think sometimes things that should be turned around quickly, because of priorities or other issues, I think we're not as good as we could be. And so one of the things that I want to have is a more standardized form or a more standardized procedure so that things can go more quickly. And so I would tell you that of the 4, I think that's the one that we have least achieved. And we tweaked a few things about how to handle things, but we need to be better on that.
Okay, that's good, and we'll come back and revisit. There are just 3 items that I wanted to at least have an answer back for, and Councilman Miller, if you have any additional. The one is the Department of Development. We just had a meeting with Director Carter, and he gave us a pretty good overview of their department. He felt very confident that he had a handle on what they were doing and that his hard close would be accomplished by the end of the year. Is there anything there that you have seen that should be brought to our attention?
No, the hard close is very important, and we've been promised it will be done by December 31st. And the reason the hard close is so important is that it prevents people from retroactively changing the data, which is a really big red flag, and it's a control and risk issue. So I believe that the people who they have put in charge, Brian Edwards is outstanding, Sona is outstanding. We miss Greg Huth, but he's gone on to other things. So I believe that they've really made tremendous strides in that area, and I'm confident that their numbers are now, it's taken 3 years to get to a point where the numbers are reliable. And so I have no reason to doubt that they will do the hard close as they have promised. And one of the things that I would say about them is that we've been pushing them on the hard close for a number of really a year and a half. And they've been upfront with us about they didn't want to do it at certain times. And so I prefer to have that no than for people to hide what they're doing. And that has never been the case with them. And so I appreciate them giving me bad news because that gives me confidence that they're telling me everything. So I believe that they will do so.
And the processes that they've put in place, billing, really capturing all the loans and all of that I know you recommended, many different areas of improvement, you're satisfied that they have come a long way? We are.
Okay. Hopefully we'll do one more review and then, kind of step back because we want to review after the hard close, of course.
Sure.
But then my hope would be that they're on their own and the processes are in place.
Good. The next question, I know Councilman Miller too would be interested. The ERP is, ongoing and has been delayed, and our former internal auditor, Corey Swisegood, was very involved in overseeing that project. So we now have an interim in place. The ERP has now been postponed until at least the first quarter of next year, with perhaps ongoing post-need. Where are you in the place where you're at today that can help us or perhaps give us guidance or suggestions as to what we should be doing to make sure that there's oversight with ERP?
So my office, because there's a potential for overlap with internal audit, is required to coordinate with them to avoid duplication of efforts. And so really, I think going back to Val Harry, who was the internal auditor prior to Corey Swaysgood, audit took charge of that. And so we have not been involved at all in that process. Kim Seeley, who is the current interim internal auditor, is very involved. And I know, for example, on Thursday, his entire day is booked doing ERP. So we have not at this time done any internal or review of ERP. We will do so if council feels that that's important. We don't, and I think that our IT person could be helpful in that. I'm reluctant to come into a process sort of halfway through the game, so to speak, but certainly we'll do so if council thinks that that's useful.
Councilman Miller, do you have an opinion on that? Do you think that the Inspector General's office, given that our past internal auditor and they're pressed, I believe, for time with the internal auditor, I mean, we are in such a crossroads right now with ERP continuing on now to the first quarter of next year. It seems a critical time.
I have not seen anything regarding the ERP project that I think particularly falls within the Inspector General's area of interest. The problems seem to be related more to problems of management and performance as opposed to anything more sinister. So that's my opinion at this time.
And I would tend to agree. Just makes me a little uneasy to have someone who was watching it so closely now given to an interim who is pressed for time and is doing the best they can, that something could slip through the cracks. But unless there is something that comes to your attention, we're probably okay with as it stands.
Okay.
Okay. Lastly, for me, and I know I gave you a heads up that I would be asking, are the driver's licenses. That doesn't get a lot of attention, but wondered if you had an update on making sure that our directors are on top of those, especially those that have been suspended.
I have a bit of an update, as in I can give you an update on everything I have. So this goes back to the driver's license review that we did at the end of the last cycle. So we had 22 potential drivers who were driving without appropriate licenses during the time period. And so out of those 22, 8 we have had no responses from directors on. But for the others, we have 3 that are no longer employed by the county, 2 of which resigned and 1 retired. We have 2 whose resignation is effective in a few days, and there is no discipline yet, but we've recommended, or we will recommend rather, withholding reimbursement for improper reimbursement for driving while their license was not adequate. There's 1 in which reimbursement documentation is being reviewed now to determine whether that's appropriate. And then, 5 do not drive in the course of employment, and 3 did not drive in the course of business or collect reimbursement during their time period of being unlicensed. Okay. So that is an issue, but we're also looking at how to make this more efficient as well, because it's not really so much an issue of the reimbursement, but it's the risk that the county is right. exposed to. Right. And so I've been working with my staff to figure out a more efficient way of doing that.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm not quite sure I caught it all, there are 8 that did not respond.
Correct.
So do you have any information on those 8? Is that part of the overview you gave us, or are those 8 just... we don't know? So
we know that those 8 during the 6-month period, there was some period in which they did not have an appropriate license. So
right. So do we know at this point in time if they are still without a license and the director? I mean, where is our risk? Sure. If you were to boil it down?
And let me just, let me quickly, so 1 had a license that was expired, so that person may still be at risk. Okay. Another one had a suspended license that was reinstated on August 29th. So then that should be okay. Another had a suspended implied consent suspension that was reinstated in October of 19.
Wait, this is August 9, or July 19.
Yeah,
So,
yes. And
you mean
we have,
18?
so we've asked the director, did this person ever drive during this period of time? And we have not heard. And so, you know, in part because I knew we'd have this discussion today, we sent out,
Right.
we tried to communicate yesterday and have not heard back. So we're gonna continue to follow up with that. But
All right, so I guess, you know, unless you think differently, Councilman, I think can we get a list of, because enough time has passed, you've been asking this question for a while. We, I think, are at high risk of having anyone with a suspended license driving on county time, or their vehicle or ours. We need to really get a definitive answer from anyone in any department that has a suspended license, or really any license that is not legal, but especially a suspended license, because that means they're either, who knows why that is. It's not an easy accomplishment. We should have a list of those that, and not so much the employee, I guess, but more the director and maybe the capacity that employee works, and get a definitive answer of yes or no. Have you handled this? Is this employee no longer driving? Have they, you know, reinstated their license? Whatever the update is, we can't not have 8 no responses of people that we know have a suspended license.
absolutely, I can
Right.
get you that list.
Okay, do you agree, Councilman Miller?
I do.
Yeah.
I think that the directors need to get the employees to respond forthwith, so that we know what the problem is and deal with it as necessary. And hopefully, in most of the cases, it's not anything serious and it can be quickly resolved. But we need to know.
We need to know, and if there is still an unresponsive answer, then we bring them into committee. I mean, I don't know what else we can do. Those are the parameters we have to work with. But we'll give them one more chance, with the caveat that if they're non-responsive, then we'll ask the committee member, the chair of that committee, that you have, whatever HR, economic development, doesn't matter which committee it is, you need to bring them in and ask them why it is that we still have people that are on unexpired licenses. But okay, good. All right, anything else, Councilman Miller?
Madam Chair, Director, you said that there were 4 new departments in the last reporting period. Who were they, and what were the circumstances?
So the 4 new departments will be for failure to pay taxes, and so those will start in the next cycle. And then, as it happens, there will be another 4 that will come off in this cycle as well. So we'll have about the same numbers. So they're all corporations that owe significant amounts of taxes to the county. And the reason for putting on the department list is we shouldn't be doing business with them and giving them county contracts until they pay the taxes that they owe to the county.
Agreed. So, have there been any new debarments from January 1 of 2019 to the present date?
Those are the ones that yes, those are the 4 that we're talking about.
Okay.
Yes.
And you said that 4 are going off by when?
4, let's see. So there will be 1 that goes off in August, and then 3 in October. And then actually in this past period, so in the 6 months that we just finished, there were quite a number that came off. So let me quickly try to count these. So there were 10 that came off as of the end of June. There will be 4 that come off going forward in this next period.
And the new debarments, how long are they for?
They'll be for up until 2022.
And
I'm sorry. Yes, that's right.
And if they pay the taxes, are they able to get off debarment, or do they have to stay debarred until 2022 regardless?
No, they would come off debarment. We just want our, we want our money. And I think once a taxpayer makes good on what they owe us, there's no reason they should be prohibited from doing business with the county.
Okay. And if we had no new debarments between now and the end of the year, how many people would we have remaining on debarment as of December 31st, 2019?
You're asking me for higher math here. I believe 9, but I may have just miscounted. So don't hold me to that exactly.
That's a pretty low number. That's lower than we've had in the past.
It is. When we first started this, we debarred large numbers of contractors because of their involvement in the county corruption scandal.
But they're now all done with that.
Yes. Yeah. So now the debarments are for there are a handful for unethical conduct, but mostly they're for development loans and failure to pay taxes.
Okay.
And, as with anything else, when the word gets out that we are looking into these that may tend to not want to put themselves in that place and not be debarred from being able to conduct business.
I would also say this, which is the prosecutor's office and the treasurer's office, through this process of the fishbowl, we generally get them before the debarment, and the corporations don't want to be put on a list. And so, it's sort of the last piece that spurs them to pay their taxes.
Yeah, that's all good work. Thank you. All right, if there's any other business, good. Thank you very much for coming today. I think that we've learned a lot. We look forward to a couple of the reports that we've asked you for, and we'll see you again for the annual report, probably in September.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
Thank
the
you.
time.
You're welcome. We are adjourned.